Dance. It has been called a marriage of movement and music, a powerful force that inspires performances which delight both artist and audience alike. But when we watch a dance performance, what are we actually seeing? Do these figures on stage represent complete and accurate portraits of human beings, or do they instead reinforce traditional stereotypes? As we observe, how often do we consider the messages about gender, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual identity carried by these images? Do they provide an invitation to all, or do they exclude those who do not identify with this narrow interpretation of the human experience? What happens when these stereotypes become the prescribed way that dance is taught and performed in our society? What happens to members of the dance community who do not identify with these images? My name is Michael Montoya. I am a transgender dancer, choreographer, and teacher. I recently had the opportunity to speak with dancers who, like me, identify as members of the LGBTQIA+ community. Dancers from different generations, ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, gender and sexual identities, and artistic experiences candidly shared their stories with me. These stories, along with my own and the experiences of others I have found through research, share many common threads. Threads which weave a tapestry of the myriad ways in which cisgender, heteronormative rules and expectations in the world of dance restrict us both personally and professionally. My goal is to unravel that tapestry, to pull back the curtain, and to move us center stage where we belong. Please join us now as we step out from the wings. The image of the female dancer generally fits one of three roles: the fragile, helpless, vulnerable waif dependent upon her male partner, the hypersexualized doll objectified for the purposes of the male gaze, or the scorned villainess filled with rage and seeking revenge. Rarely do we see images of women on stage that exhibit strength, power, or independence. Instead, female roles are consistently framed in their relation to heterosexual men.
You're expected to be soft and dainty and pretty, and in some aspects as a female you're expected to be sexual, but you can't be too sexual that it's raunchy. And like that balance too, there's these extreme expectations of how you're expected to look and move and be within that gender role of being a female dancer, but it can't be to one extreme or the other. It has to be perfectly streamlined in the middle.
Unfortunately, these are the roles that are often taught and reinforced in the training of dancers who are assigned female at birth, from the minute they step into the dance studio, as well as when they take part in the world of competitive dance.
The competition and that world was definitely like, the gender was much more, I don't want to say oppressing, but I want to say oppressing. The like punchline of the dance would be the man coming out and doing a trick. It feels like for the ensemble of the women or whatever, they can't really outpower that male for that one, because it's one male. It's one guy that he needs to be that punchline. He needs to be that winning factor. We want to please the audience. We want to please the judges. So we do what they're comfortable with, or what we assume they're comfortable with. And to me, from sitting in the audience, it looks like the strength of a male, and then the like submissive kind of aspect of the females, and like going with it, and like the numbers of like there's a male and then there's 3 women behind me. That's like, oh my gosh, that emphasizes his strength.
In addition to facing strict expectations of their style of movement, female dancers must also contend with ultra-feminine, revealing, and often hypersexualized costuming. Control over costuming and class attire is often so rigid that dancers, especially those who are gender expansive, rarely feel comfortable asking for accommodations.
as a dancer, like especially from a young age, you're kind of trained like what the choreographer says goes. You're trained in a way where you don't question it. It's just the way it is, and that's how it looks, because again, you're taught that you are a tool in the creation of this art. You are not an individual in it. I feel like there's a lot of costumes that I've been uncomfortable with, physically, particularly when I was exploring my masculinity and like really kind of defining what my gender is for me as an individual. I've definitely had, again, like evening gowns that just like made me feel very uncomfortable, things that felt very posh and hyper feminine or were overexposing of my body. So having these tight form fitting things like leotards constantly, like bodysuits, like evening gowns, things cinched at the waist, or oftentimes like in contemporary dance, you're asked to wear like lingerie of some sort or a slip dress. With the choreographer and artistic director that I had at the time, I definitely didn't feel safe in that environment to approach them about it.
The costuming is just, there is no in between. It's like the girls' costume and the boys' costume. And I was like, oh great, well I just have to accept this. I don't want to accept that. It was very, very scary because I was like, well, I want to do ballet and I want to do this, but I'm terrified and I don't want to wear a leotard. I don't want to do that because it's this tight forming material that is accentuating every part of your body, and unlike male dancers who can have pants.
Being a male judge and having teenage girls brought out on stage wearing negligees, slips, bras. Now, I'm not even talking a costume top. I'm talking a bra that is an undergarment. That is, somehow this is supposed to be okay. I mean, you wouldn't want a child to show up to school dressed like this. You wouldn't let your own child dressed out of the house dressed like this. But somehow it's okay because we're putting them up on a stage in a theater full of people.
There's such an addiction to the body and how it looks, and then it's also sexualized. In ballet, it's like, oh no, she's in a leotard and tights, and he's in tights and he's wearing a tank top. Oh, that's good. Well, what if we switch that around and put her in a tank top and black tights? What would you think then?
With an extreme emphasis on body type, especially the idealized hyper-feminine figure, there is a culture of body shaming that exists in dance that can have severe effects on gender-expansive women. This situation is not helped by the fact that dance persists in being deeply patriarchal. Although most dancers are female, most choreographers and company directors are male, giving them tremendous power over female dancers. For lesbian dancers, the cross-section of being female and identifying as queer often leaves them feeling inhibited and unsafe.
Being a female and being raised a female, you know, you're told in a lot of settings not to take up too much space, not to speak too much. And then also as a queer person, that is put on you even more.
As a woman, I've felt pretty constrained, you know, in what I'm allowed to do, what I should do, and, you know, how I should look and all of that.
It's just the amount of toxicity that is slapped, that men have, the power that a male dancer has on a female dancer, because that female dancer doesn't want to lose that role, doesn't want to be ridiculed. She wants to work to that perfection, which is exactly what ballet kind of shoots for. But it isn't really perfect, but it's perfectly misogynistic.
You know, ballet can be extremely traditional, and in those traditions, there's an expectation of gender roles and storytelling that's being played. As a more feminine, expressing gender-wise lesbian, don't have as difficult of a time with it, but I definitely have friends that have felt extremely shunned and isolated.
When I was training and dancing professionally, it was before I had transitioned. It was before I had dealt with or accepted myself as transgender. I identified as lesbian, and I struggled tremendously with body image, struggled tremendously to try and dance in the feminine style that was expected of me. I was a professional jazz dancer. I took a lot of ballet classes to really improve my jazz, and even though I was very good at it, I constantly made fun of myself. I called myself a ballerino. I called myself a bull in a china shop. I felt like I think what I was feeling is that if I beat people to the punch, that they wouldn't make fun of me. And the whole time just trying to hold back how shamed I felt for my more masculine tendencies and the way that I naturally moved. I knew that that wasn't accepted.
I did have a young girl who, she didn't transition. She came out as gay. She came out as lesbian. She was really bullied and harassed for being gay, and or looking gay. I saw some of my dancers, and they come to me privately and tell me about how they were being treated at the school I was working at by some of the male guest artists. The director was told not to bring it up to the child, why they were keeping this one misogynistic man on. And the owner still went and told the young dancer, listen, we're keeping this dancer on because he can do this, this, and this, and this. And you're graduating, so it's okay. Well, the problem with that is about 8 months after she left, she actually started having seizures. She couldn't have a way to talk about the abuse she was having.
Opposite the female, the male dancer is expected to be strong and hyper-masculine. He is confident and powerful. His emotions are confined to anger, brotherly love, and at times, limited amounts of sadness or emotional pain. Most significantly, his romantic affections are reserved exclusively for women. In traditional choreography, the male is the base and the female is the featured dancer. The woman is the picture, the man is the frame.
Every time that I was partnering with a girl, of course, she's what everybody's seeing. Mm-hmm. I'm just doing the heavy work to make her look good. It just makes you feel like you're a prop instead of one of the dancers in the group.
When it comes to training, it is standard practice for dancers to be separated into male and female tracks. While female dance training focuses primarily on flexibility, feminine expression, and feminine movement quality, male training in choreography moves in a much different direction, especially in the world of ballet.
So you really get these big jumping combinations versus the point work and the dainty point work. And the girls get the point classes, the boys get the men's classes. And it's because we have an implicit bias that says girls can't jump like that. You constantly had men's technique and you were taught by a man and you're always taught by a man. And if you were ever going into like a partnering thing, partnering was always taught by a guy because the dude knew how to partner the girl. The boy does know what the girl does. He doesn't know how to do it, but he knows where she's going to be at and how she's got to do it so that she doesn't fall over. Because as a socialized male dancer, ballet dancer, your job is to make them look good. Don't drop them. And if you don't drop them, you get another role. Like that's like you become proficient as a partner. And if you can do a double tour and 4 pirouettes, you've got a job next year.
Although it is an expectation of female ballet dancers, male ballet dancers rarely dance on point. And when they do, their performances are usually viewed as comedic and not as serious artistic work.
And I've seen some young male dancers that are incredible on point, but there was one of those like, you don't do that.
Even though homosexual men have long been tolerated as participants in dance, it has been with the caveat that they train in the male dance track and not only exclusively portray heterosexual male roles on stage, but also masculinize their movement as much as possible.
I'm thinking back when I was working with at the nightclubs. Back then, we had this stereotype that a lot of singers didn't want to hire guys, or because the really good dancers were very feminine, they were very gay. And so you had this expectation of like, if you're gonna be a male dancer, you need to look like a male dancer.
Even if the movement is fluid or in a feminine, has feminine textures, I'm gonna just say that, has feminine textures or qualities, then as a man in the company realm, you still have to make it where it reads off as a man moving just fluidly, you know, and regardless of the movement, you have to still find a balance between showing the feminine quality, but masculating it on your body. Me coming up, me being naturally feminine, or some people would consider me a form of androgynous. I definitely had to find balance.
We sit there and we say boys learn differently than girls, so we're going to make sure the boys go to the back of that combination and they learn from the girls that are in front. And then we get mad the boys are dancing too feminine. Go figure.
Support and be strong and be grounded.
You could be more grounded.
The groundedness.
Be grounded, be strong. That meant you're dancing too feminine because a man doesn't dance feminine. Okay, this idea that this is how a man is supposed to dance, rather than I'm a man, this is how I dance, therefore this is how a man dances. When it comes to clothing, male dancers are often given more options than females, but within limits. For instance, a male dancer may be given the option to wear track pants instead of tights for class, but not the option of wearing the attire assigned to female dancers. And on stage, a male dancer's costuming can be just as hypersexualized as a female's. The next quote that I have is actually from a friend of mine who I worked with professionally, and I thought he said it very succinctly, in that most of his costumes on stage could fit in a sandwich bag. The entire time I danced with him, I thought about it, I never saw the man on stage with a shirt on. I had another friend who, for a while, had a job where 6 days a week he was dancing in a loincloth. Regardless of their assigned gender at birth, gender identity, or sexual identity, all the dancers interviewed who were uncomfortable with these expectations expressed that they felt equally inhibited and unsafe in speaking up to express their concerns. Again, the norms of what constitutes male and female attire and the expectations to follow a binary dress code are so strongly enforced that dancers generally accept that they must wear what is expected of them.
I think I just don't like wearing form-fitting clothing in general. Something about like the structure of the class really made me feel like that was not a topic to be approached, except for like in graduate school. Mm-hmm. I think that was the only time that I felt comfortable asking, just because of the sort of like hierarchical structure.
For transgender dancers, given the fact that we are most often required to train in the track and wear the attire required of our assigned birth gender, we often experience increased dysphoria and or dysmorphia just by stepping into a dance studio. Many trans dancers feel they must make a choice between dance and life as their true selves, since they've been told the two cannot coexist.
The dance world is just, it's toxic. It's really toxic. When I was first starting the concept of doing dance classes for the trans community, I had more than dozens of people come up to me and say, "Oh, I love dance until I came out." One thing I face as a dance studio owner is I work with their fear. Like, one, they fear community in society. And we do. And then secondly, we fear how we're going to be looked at in dance studios, how we're going to feel in a dance studio, how we're intimidated by our own ego in a dance studio. There is no mirror in my studio. There's not one dance mirror, because my trans males come in there and I suggest that they don't wear their binders, because having a binder and doing dance is one of the hardest things. And if I partner that with my medical practice, one of the biggest things I see with my trans males is bronchitis and rib displacement, particularly along the sternum. They're getting a lot of problems here. Then they're susceptible for pneumonia. And on top of it, their dysphoria goes through the roof if they're not wearing that binder.
If we pursue medical transition, there are many physical changes that can occur when we take hormones and or undergo any number of types of gender-affirming surgeries. As a result, we may need to retrain our bodies so that we can again perform the specific movements required of dance. When we take hormones, the physical changes are going to change our musculature. It's going to change our center of gravity. My feet even changed. Okay, I had to retrain myself in a lot of ways. When you have surgical transition, again, you're making huge changes on your body. For me, when I had gender affirming surgery, one of the muscles in my legs was moved. The gracilis muscle in my left leg had to be moved. Okay, that affected me being able to do a passe. I spent 1.5 years trying to retrain myself. Even after we transition, trans dancers are still at a disadvantage, since most of us have never had the gender-specific training that matches our true identity. This often leaves us emotionally and psychologically vulnerable. I was terrified to get back into taking ballet class because I didn't want to have to out myself every time I took class. Okay, people would see me dance. It's obvious I've had advanced training, but I can't explain why I don't know how to do lifts. I don't know how to do partnering. I don't know the male roles of anything. And that people are constantly commenting, like, kind of confused at how I move. My upper body, how I move my arms and my hands, is not typical for male dancers.
You put a trans girl, an 11-year-old trans girl, into a ballet program, a professional ballet school, and you get a teacher that doesn't know they're trans, slaps the expectation and the bias that because they're female, they should know that stuff. I have a young trans girl who went to get point shoe fitting, and the teacher didn't know she was trans. The teacher comes and helps them with the point shoe. Well, she's there and she's like, well, what's wrong with your foot? The mother had to out the child. The mother had to out the child in front of a teacher at a point shoe fitting.
It is also not uncommon for us to face backlash from choreographers and directors when undergoing a gender transition. I've talked to company directors who seemed almost angry or insulted that their trans dancers didn't come forward to them and say, okay, I'm going through a gender transition and I'm going to start taking hormones and, or I'm going to have surgery. And I tried to explain to her, I said, this is deeply personal, okay? When you have gender reassignment surgery, that's not something that you just start talking to everybody about what process you've gone through. And also the process of transitioning. It is a transition. You don't flip a switch and then the next day, all of a sudden you're the other gender. It is a switch it's a transition in body, mind, and soul. And it's a very long emotional process. And so sharing that with other people can be very difficult. Although some professional companies and dance schools are beginning to create new opportunities, we are still most often held to rigid gender and training expectations. Studio owners often lack the knowledge, empathy, and understanding required to meet the needs of our community.
There are some ballet companies that like to do that, like Pacific Northwest Ballet Company right now has a non-binary Black dancer, which is great. I love it. I think that allows it. But ballet schools aren't going to know how to teach to that person. That boy was taught like a boy up until the moment he said, I'm trans now, and I can do both. They say they use gender inclusive language. They say all of this. Not once has a school been taught about gender inclusive or diversity. They've never been taught this at all, but they'll put that language on their website and make the trans person feel so good. And I'm not saying I have a problem with the term traditional, but I think it needs to be reevaluated in the dance community because it isn't traditional. It is traditionally sexist. It's traditionally misogynistic, and it's traditionally discriminatory. So I think that really, let's get down to the point. It's a traditional dance that's traditionally discriminating.
The world of dance does not know where to place non-binary, intersex, or agender dancers. Few forms offer training, choreography, or roles that make space for those who identify without or with more than one gender.
For someone who wants to explore their gender and explore their sexuality, it's hard when that's your world. There isn't any other. Like, we know it, that there are other people out there, but in delving into the arts and dance, there's no room for it. Going into this space not wanting to be feminine, and then acknowledging the fact that I had to be. There are boys' classes. Why can't I take that boys' class? There are classes where the boys dance together because that's how they train. Why can't I take that class? In the end, it comes out to that's a technique that I'm missing, that I could improve upon. And you're not letting me do it?
I think it's important to address like these sort of like expectations of different physical, like facility kind of related things. But I also think that a lot of like what I'm experiencing in my colleagues and their relationship with ballet goes down to even like appearance entering class. You know what I mean? Not even it is that, and also like the way that bodies are made to be visible in those spaces are also something that needs more malleability.
Most productions feature cisgender, heteronormative characters and relationships, and listings for auditions most often contain gender exclusionary phrases. This leaves many either outright ineligible, or at the very least unsure if they would be welcome to audition. If a non-binary artist is cast, they are often criticized for having taken the role from a more deserving dancer, one whose assigned gender at birth matches the role as written, and they are admonished for diminishing the artistic integrity of the piece. This is a criticism often faced by transgender dancers as well.
Even when auditioning, you can't even, there's two guys, you don't even get looked at for the male role. What if I could do that better than them? It's what's best for the performance. If they're what's best for the performance, great, go for it. I will accept that because that's it. Sure. There are roles where the directors want that body, they want that anatomy. I hope that they would be more open.
If I see male dancer, I think, well, they don't mean me. That's what goes on in my head, because before I transitioned, most of my most difficult experiences were with cisgender heterosexual men. They were the most hostile towards me, the most cruel. And so I don't come to the immediate conclusion that I would be welcome auditioning for this part. Or if I passed and someone found out I was trans, would there be repercussions? Would they say, well, that's not what we wanted here?
The idea of making that extreme divide of like light for feminine, for females,
Right.
and strong for males. Why can't you be both? Why can't it ebb and flow? Why can't I play a male and just be completely feminine? It doesn't matter.
I frequently find that I get sort of like pigeonholed into like hypermasculine ways of dancing, or I often am like the base for lifts, even in like various forms of contemporary dance. There's still like some expectations that are sort of like continued, like why aren't you jumping X amount high, right? Because that's like a total like male body dancer thing. It makes me wonder what they saw when they saw me before they cast me. You know, it makes me wonder like if they were looking at like just the shape of the body or the way that I was moving. You know, because those things don't necessarily correspond.
Although self-determined gender exploration and exploration into masculine and feminine behaviors are both healthy and appropriate in all stages of childhood development, the requirement for children to perform in roles and in costumes that do not align with their self-identity is not. Requiring a dancer to perform in these roles may not only inhibit them from exploring and becoming comfortable with their own gender and sexual identity, but have long-lasting, detrimental psychological effects as well.
There were many of times where, for instance, you know, as a female, if there weren't enough boys, I was asked to dress as a boy to play like the male role in those dances. And I would feel this sense of like excitement and euphoria in my body, and it felt so comfortable and it felt good, you know, and then in my mind, I'd be like, oh, I'm feeling this way. Like, this is exciting, but also like, no, I can't be like that. Like, that's not it. You know what I mean? I'm a girl. I have to be feminine. I have to do this. Like, I'm going to put on my lipstick, throw my hair in a bun, and put on my sparkly costume with my fishnet tights and my character shoes and go, you know? And it was it made things a lot more confusing because it was hard to differentiate how much of it was me playing a character and understanding that character and how much of it was me as a person actually feeling that way. That disassociation from who you actually are because you're technically playing a character also makes it very confusing and kind of like forces you to take a step away from just being like, this is me, like in this moment, feeling and experiencing these things. And I definitely think it kind of like slows down the process a little bit of self-discovery. And especially with me, because I am mainly feminine presenting, but I also have days where I want to present more masculine and I want to be masculine and take on that role within my relationships and my own life. And it's definitely something that has always pushed me further away from that.
When I was dancing and trying to continue to fit into this very feminine role, once I got it, I felt like, wow, okay, this is who I'm supposed to be. If I can act this way on stage, I should be acting this way in life. If I can be this feminine, then I must not be trans. That's what was going on in my head. I had two other transgender young adult dancers who did not want to be interviewed on film because they were so traumatized by being forced to play roles that didn't align with their gender, by being ignored. And they left dance, they left the arts completely because they felt there was just no room for them. There was no room for it in the art.
So I see it in my students. I see them either voting with their feet and walking out and never coming back to dance. As I have seen almost every one of my young dancers that came out to me, they don't dance anymore.
In the world of dance, choices at casting, choreography, staging, setting, partnering, and storytelling are almost exclusively heteronormative and are made to appeal to cisgender heterosexual audiences. This leaves LGBTQIA+ dancers few opportunities to portray characters that match their identity. For one participant who had never had such an opportunity, the mere concept was almost beyond comprehension.
I would be excited. I would be so like motivated where like if I'm dancing with another guy and we're doing all these crazy things and we're almost like equals, that's awesome. I think to this day, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. And to see that on stage, I would be like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like I would want to audition for that company.
For those dancers who had had the opportunity to perform in roles matching with their gender and sexual identities, the differences between the experience of performing as their true selves, as opposed to cisgender heteronormative characters, was quite stark.
You're asked to bring a certain aspect of yourself and your trauma and your experiences to a piece of work. And when dancing and being asked to play straight roles or characters or portray those types of relationships and connections with people, they're always, you know, you can pull on that, but it doesn't feel authentic to you. It feels like you're playing a character. It feels like you're steps away from who you actually are. And it kind of takes away that out of body experience that people tend to have when they're performing, where they just feel so invested and into it because you're a step away from you. I actually freelance dance for a queer dance company. And it was the first time that somebody sat me down and said, hey, these are my costume ideas. What do you feel comfortable in? How do you want to be expressed as an individual within this unit? Over just being like, okay, you're assigned a female, so you're going to wear the dress and the boys are going to wear this. And like having that option and being in that environment of other queer dancers was just like the most like liberatingly beautiful experience that I've had.
What was most fun for me was joy, you know, because I was really hard on myself those years. I could tell you, I had to work very hard. And so to be able to have joy and come out of my box and perform was just so freeing for me. I had so much fun, and the group was really solid. We traveled together. We went to rodeos. We went to we even flew to Charlie's in Phoenix at the time, and I really was about being a bigger, larger, happier version of myself.
So I got the chance to learn this part of male. It was a trio of 3 guys, and it's called Seen and Unseen. I was the smallest out of the 3, so hey, I got to be lifted the most. It was amazing. There's been opportunities where another girl gets to support me and counterbalance, or we both kind of play this kind of role, and it doesn't have to be girl, oh, because she's the girl, she cannot lift me. No, it was about the art, it was about the idea that Nanette had, and we made it happen. The solo that I'm gonna be presenting in Vegas is very masculine, but I'm wearing a skirt. We came with this idea. It's the piece is called Matador, but I'm wearing this very opposite, because then I break from like this, like very masculine into like very soft.
In Pippin, are you familiar with the show? I got to play the leading player, which is the most, and I totally forgot about that, but that is the
leading player, a wonderful example of a non-binary.
Oh my God, because it all came down to what energy you placed on the audience. That's it. What you did with that is what you did with that. If you didn't, and it's up to the director and all of that, because of if they go into it saying, oh, I want a male leading player, but none of those males that audition create that energy, don't take it. Don't take, like, do it like, and I got so lucky. It was so fun. Oh my God.
One of my first dance experiences was a burlesque show, and it was so liberating. And I think that was really like the seed that sort of like made me think more deeply about what's going on. You know what I mean? Yeah, because it was very gender bent. It was very, very gender bent and very fluid in its presentation. Mm-hmm. So that was like a really important experience for me.
Me, when I go on stage, I am in that character. I am in the zone. I don't even see the people in the audience. I see lights, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I play that character, and I entertain, and I tell a story. That's my job as the dancer, the performer.
Right. How does that compare when you're able to play a role that does match with your sexual identity, and where you're able to be more just your genuine self? How does that compare for you?
It's definitely a little more exciting, because now I'm like, oh, I'm being myself. So now I get to play with the actual texture a little bit more, because this is me. It's me giving my all for that character. With the J setting and Vogue, where it's okay to be as flamboyant as you want, to have that sass and have that attitude, because that's what it's about.
Not only do LGBTQIA+ dancers seldom have the opportunity to portray characters that match our identity, equally problematic is the fact that as audience members, we rarely see our experiences reflected back to us from the stage.
I feel like seeing the representation now is very important, regardless of the style. If I see 2 men partnering, you know what I'm saying, I'm just going to be excited because it's 2 men partnering.
People have invited me to go see the zombie ballet Giselle. And I'm like, oh, that's a great zombie ballet. It's a wonderful ballet. I've done it. I've done the role of Hilarion. I've set half of that ballet before. And then someone goes, but they had live dogs on stage. And I'm like, where's my representation? They wouldn't put a trans person on stage, but they're going to make sure that there's a dog on stage.
I think it's important for everyone, period, to see their experiences on stage. You know what I mean? I think that the idea of like a neutral body, right? This idea that like there's a kind of like neutrality to the body is like false, patently. Like there's always information that comes with bodies, and seeing them reflect your own experiences, even if it's very abstractly, is super duper duper important, because it also sends a message about like what that form values.
Although homosexual dancers are commonly accepted in both teaching and performance, due to bias and discrimination, lesbian, transgender, and non-binary dancers are not. Although people both within and beyond the dance community may express outrage over the bullying of cisgender male dancers, there is no equivalent outrage for the rest of us. If hired, we may be the only one of our identity employed with the group and may experience intolerance and ostracism in a number of different ways.
Especially in a professional setting as well with teaching, I feel like I try to present more femininely because I don't know the beliefs of the parents. I don't know the beliefs of the students. And I had trauma at a studio where a friend of mine subbed for me and outed me in the studio classroom as the teacher. And she didn't know that the students didn't know. And it was in conservative Indiana. And I had students that were uncomfortable and parents who thought that I was going to turn their kids by being their teacher, and they made it into something that was gender-based and sexual instead of me just being a teacher that cared about their children and wanted to teach them proper technique and like safe dance.
As I started to transition, I got pushed back from from the family members. I got a lot of support, but I also got some pushback, especially from the young kids, and not from just the young kids. They were coming from the parents. And so I recognized that, and then she cut my hours. She just didn't explain anything. She just got me out of there. At that point, I am 2.5 years into my full transition, and I start giving my resumes out to all these ballet schools. Now, at that point, I have a master's degree in medicine. I have a complete career and 25 years plus choreography, and I can't get a job. I'm literally calling up, people are hanging up on me. I'm like, hi, I'm Christina. I'm calling about my resume. I dropped it off. Click. Like that was happening.
Once specific dancers found out that I identify how I identify, their comfort level with me in partner work changed. How they chose to give weight to me and what body parts they wanted to use within that partner work to share and give weight to me in the contemporary dance setting changed. Their behavior in the dressing rooms and how they interacted with each other versus how they interacted with me, they were like a lot more hidden and private. You could tell that they had this subconscious hesitation or assuming that just because I present the way that I present and I identify the way that I identify, that I'm attracted to them specifically. Once they discover those things about you, it changes their willingness and openness to explore movement pathways as units in a specific way. I know it changed my frame of mind as well, of like, I'm a lot more conscious of how I ask for, I guess, consent when it comes to partner work and what people are comfortable with, because I know that there are people that are going to be uncomfortable with it. I sadly have to take on the responsibility of kind of overworking to understand other people's comfort level. One, to protect myself and my job, and two, to ensure that that collaborative space stays positive and open.
I remember being in a rehearsal one time, and my director talking about the part, that I was going to be playing, the role and everything, and where I was going to be and who was going to be working with me. And the dancer wouldn't come out onto the dance floor. And he'd go and talk to her, and she's and he comes back and says, oh, she's not feeling well. And it wasn't until later that he shared with me that it was that she didn't want to dance with me. And it bothered me that he did not stand up for me and say, here's your role, you're dancing with this person that I've chosen for. Instead, he gave it to her and switched us around.
And basically proved to her that she's okay to do that.
Right.
It's not okay.
And that left me feeling just very hurt, that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't like, that it was okay to not dance with me. It was okay.
Just because.
Yeah, it was okay to refuse to share a dressing room with me. So when I was in the dressing room, I would sort of hide in a corner, and I would very consciously look at the floor or turn my face to the wall because I didn't want anybody to think that I was looking at them.
Yeah.
You know, because that had already been expressed. It was very uncomfortable the whole time I was in that. This idea that somehow I was, you know, I had 30 seconds to get back on stage, but had time to stare at another dancer's body was so insulting,
Right.
so hurtful.
So what I ended up running into is when I transitioned, they'd still stick me into a boys' dressing room. I felt extremely uncomfortable. I'd be doing Drosselmeyer Nutcracker or some character role, and I just felt uncomfortable. Also didn't feel that comfortable in a cis dressing room because the moms were questioning me, like, are you really looking at my daughter? Or like, you just had this guardedness by the parents, which is fine. You're a parent. You are allowed to protect your child. I get it. But they had their own bias against me as well. Like, oh yeah, you're still a boy. I don't think I'll ever be accepted. I know there's bias. I know there's these ideas that this is what women and boys do, and you're breaking that.
Without exception, all the dancers interviewed stressed that support from their fellow dancers was essential in creating a safe and productive working environment.
Well, you know, it's very helpful to be on a team, you know, where you do have that support and that cohesion. And I really hadn't had that experience. I wasn't in sports as a young person. And so I really hadn't had that experience. And traveling together and going places, I felt much more at ease, more safety than maybe I would have otherwise. I guess I just felt so much closeness.
Peers can pull you aside and have connections with you and all of that, and that's extremely important. And I had a really good friend who taught me to express myself, and that I didn't know how to do. I didn't know, and that going hand in hand with the teachers and like the mentors and all of that is great. But the peers is, even if it's not even, oh, you're doing great. It's just like, I'm gonna let you do your thing. That's better than nothing. Right. And that's what I got. I'm gonna let you do your thing, and like, unfortunately, I in myself was restricting myself, but I couldn't imagine what it would be if they were vocal about it, or even if they had the thoughts about it. I probably wouldn't be there. I probably wouldn't be in the world. So it's just like, how many dancers were lost, or like, for that. That's at least what I think about. Like, well, I was in probably the most ideal situation in that point in time, and I still had trouble.
Throughout this presentation, we have discussed a variety of ways in which the traditional gender and sexual identity roles taught and enforced in the world of dance have negatively affected LGBTQI+ dancers. So where do we go from here? What can and should be done to make things better? For starters, we encourage teachers, directors, and choreographers to educate themselves about our community, about what it takes to create safe and inclusive spaces that encourage gender neutrality and equity in training, attire, and opportunity for all dancers.
I think that the most important would be the teacher's knowledge. Even the pronouns puts an image into the student's mind of, this is something that matters.
We have an enormous group of uneducated teachers across the board that don't. We were taught the way we were taught. Kids, children, dancers. Let's start using these gender inclusive language, because you have just made me walk out because I didn't feel like I saw myself there. We've got young kids that are having to rework their brain to say, I'm trans or I'm non-binary, but then they go into a space that has no identification that way. And that is that you're literally going in there with fisticuffs unless you've got a bunch of people that are trans. What I love to do in my classes is I'll ask the student, I'll be like, hey, Michael, did you want to dance more masculine or more feminine? Or were you shooting for gender neutral? And that's never been asked of a dancer. Ballet schools do not feel like they're discriminatory or have an implicit bias. The fact that they don't actively search and seek out diversity and inclusion is the biggest crime. I have in my lobby at it's a small studio, but I have a big heart with and include like all the trans flags and intersex flags and all the most progressive flag out there. And it says a brave space, a proud space. When I see people come in, especially trans, non-binary, or just trans people, and they're just that like awe, like that just fills my cup up. Like this fills my cup up with love, because I'm like, they know they're at a place that they can do what they want to do and not be told that they can't.
I hope that for the future of dance, I think dance teachers, especially like youth dance teachers from a very young age, need to openly allow students to express themselves and play the genders that they want to in that frame of mind, whether that is a permanent decision for them or a temporary one. Gender is not a costume that you can throw on. It's not a character. It is very much who you are and how you identify. Professional companies need to take on the responsibility to allow dancers to choose the gender of the costumes in which they want to present. Because I know that when I was offered that option, that was one of the most liberating things for me, was finally feeling seen and heard. And it made me feel extremely safe in a space to know that I just wouldn't be thrown in something because I was assigned female at birth. Also, I think too, it's the director's job, you know, the director's and the choreographer's job. You create the community that your dancers are in, and it's important to have open conversations with them, even if they're difficult. And I think that teachers, choreographers, and artistic directors need to take it upon themselves to sit down and have these types of conversations about orientation, about identity, about how sexual orientation in specific doesn't mean that they're attracted to you, because it affects everyone, and it is not and should not be our responsibility as members of the community to make other people feel comfortable for just authentically being who we are. Professional companies need to take on the responsibility to not fetishize is the wrong word, but to not showcase a feminine man or a masculine woman moving as a token. We are not tokens. We are not your diversity quota. We don't want to be. And you shouldn't be applauded for it either, because we are human beings and we are not a handout.
I just feel like there just needs to be safety established for these dancers, that they can feel like, you know what, I want to talk to you about this. And feeling like they're going to have somebody who says, what do you need from me? How can I help you?
If you lose students because you want to create a safe space for your dancers to be the best dancers that they can be, do it. I think you do it. I think that you make it work, and if it doesn't work, you find a way to make it work.
Kind of looking at dance practices as they exist and kind of taking a minute to think about and maybe revise how we're approaching training dancers. I think how we talk about bodies is a big one. I think how we and this is going back to sort of like training maybe, but also maybe also writing reviews and critical analysis of dance. Like really paying attention to like what we're zeroing in on.
Although the industry has a long way to go towards inclusivity, we would be remiss in not sharing that there are some very fine teachers, dancers, choreographers, and company directors who are breaking through and creating innovative works that feature LGBTQIA+ dancers and themes for all audiences.
It takes me back to a video I watched about classical ballet, because it was the guy and the girl lifting each other. And it was contemporary ballet, but it was still ballet, and they breaking these roles. This is from Canada, Ontario, I think. And I was like, okay, so there's people trying to do this thing, trying to break away from the normal. I think it can happen in any other genre. Like it can happen in jazz. It could happen in modern. I think it's exciting to see that like the norms are, you know, opening up, and people are much more open-minded.
I'm just excited to see how queer folks of like all walks of life push dance further. You know what I mean? I think that there's something about it that there's a different frame of mind that I think is necessary. I'm also excited that like by noting that there's like a better understanding of the queer perspective, I also mean not explicitly just like cisgendered white gay men. We're finally branching beyond into other stories and other perspectives.
Everything is becoming so, I don't want to say merged, but it's becoming so fluid in a sense where if you can do it and you fit the criteria, then go do it. The name is Ashton Edwards. They was recently on Dance Spirit Dance magazine cover. I've never seen someone who identifies as she and still able to play both roles. When I tell you, it's a beautiful thing.
Ballet de Barcelona, Chase Johnsley, he danced in Trocaderos at Monte Carlo for 15 years. And through a connection of a group I was in, I was connected with him. Well, he did Point for 15 years. So if you go and look at Ballet de Barcelona, he's got boys on Point that are just gorgeous on Point. Choreographers like Billy Forsyth in Germany doing amazing work over there. And it's so this gender neutral space.
It should come as no surprise that young LGBTQIA+ dancers face many challenges when attempting to find acceptance and to carve out a place for themselves in the world of dance. So, to these young dancers, we offer words of encouragement and support.
You, if this is like something you're passionate about, pursue it, do it, and go.
Always stay true to self. Find what you love, perfect it, mold it, push it. That's all I can say. Promote it. Don't be afraid to show off your work. Don't be afraid to sometimes pat yourself on the back after a while. And don't be afraid to take a break and breathe.
I've educated myself in this past year more than I have in the amount of time that I've danced about myself. And that changes it tremendously, because it's like we have all these preconceived notions and these preconceived ideas because of the world that we're growing up in, which is extremely unfortunate, but that's not the world around it. You know, you have to remove yourself to a certain extent, not leave it, but remove yourself, because any knowledge will make you a better performer. Right. And if the knowledge that you need is something to like make you sane, in a sense of like, oh, I can do this, find that, please, because like I'm a better dancer because of it. Because it's not only muscles, it's not only anatomy, it's mindset.
You have to be proud within your own body, within your own space, and you have to be brave within your own body to be able to take on that. Because it's not just that these kids are taking on a dance school and a dance community, but they're taking on the ignorance of parents. They're taking on the hate of parents. They're taking on the hate of a group of society. So you start to have to take this and hold it and say, now, as a young dancer at 10, 11, 12, 13, you have to be brave enough to stand up against it. No wonder we're sick at school half the time. No wonder we don't want to go and take a dance class, because we're not sure the teacher is going to be respectful of who we are. And it's a lot to ask. Like, as a teacher of 25 years, to ask this question to me is like, oh crap, I'm just trying to deal with this myself. And now you're asking young kids that are non-binary and trans femme and trans mask, or just questioning, to be allowed to continue to question in a dance class that isn't allowed to have questions. And that's tough. I would just say, be brave, be proud, know you're not alone.
Find something. Start small, find something. Even if it isn't a gay group at first, just go out and learn some things, and keep looking, because you'll find it. I mean, I've been amazed when I go.
as we consider all that the dancers have shared regarding gender, gender identity, and sexual identity in the world of dance, I ask you to consider one last concept. If, as I stated earlier, dance is a marriage of movement and music, why do we not apply the same genderless standards to both? Neither music nor the instruments used to create it have an assigned gender. Why then must dance? The gender or sexual identity of the musician is of no consequence for the creation of music. So why is the same not also true for the dancer? Pianissimo, fortissimo, staccato, legato, whatever they may be, there are no masculine or feminine references in musical terminology, and yet instructors and directors are able to clearly express the dynamic and performance qualities they seek without any gender references. I argue that the same is not only possible, but preferable in the world of dance. After all, when we ask someone to dance feminine, do we mean to say that we want soft, fluid movements? When we ask them to dance masculine, are we actually looking for strong, angular lines? It is my firm belief that we have all the tools and terminology necessary to clearly describe the movement quality we seek without ever having to use the labels of masculine or feminine or any other gender terms. Dance is neither male nor female. It is a creation of movement that is neither masculine nor feminine. And just like musicians and the music they create, given the opportunity, all dancers have the same potential to create all qualities of movement, regardless of their gender or sexual identity. All dance for all people. That should be our goal.
Dance to me shouldn't have a label. Dance should be free.